Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Ivan Ramirez, Digital Experience Director for Revolución Educativa, here once again with another episode of RevvED. Our RevvED series this summer, we have been highlighting our Impacto Changemakers here in Kansas City, which are different professionals, community leaders, parents, activists that are creating change here in Kansas City in their own areas. Some people are in environmental advocacy, some are in politics, some are into education. But today we have a special guest. I'm really excited to bring it on screen, my friend Melanie Arroyo. Welcome, Melanie.
Hola, muchas gracias. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I was looking forward to chatting with you. So how are you? How's your summer?
Oh my God, it's good. I can't believe it's almost over though.
I know.
It's been eventful. It's been busy. It's been relaxing. Un poquito de todo, but
Yeah,
overall, it's
yeah.
been good.
No, I just got back from Mexico, and it's always sad getting back because I know that the summer is over. Because I tend to go at the end of the summer. Um, but I
Yeah.
had the time of my life. You also went to Mexico. How was that?
Yes, I went back to Chihuahua back in May, and let me tell you, that was my first time going back to Chihuahua in 20 years, and that was surreal. It's like the last time I was there, I was 11, and now I'm like, or like I was 10, and now I'm like this grown woman, and like things look the same but different, and you get all the feels, It's
Hmm.
it's it's a whole different experience.
I always get in my feels when I get back. It's hard being an immigrant and having two homes, having two places where you belong. Now I've learned that it's part of the process, getting back and mourning that feeling of being home. But yeah, it was hard at the beginning. I didn't know why I was sad coming back home. Uh,
Sí, ¿verdad? No, así pasa, es un proceso. It's like, it's more than just a vacation, right? It's like,
yeah, yeah.
it's going back to your home and like you feel
Mhm.
comfortable. You don't have to be like worried about like the politics or the atmosphere or the issues that are happening here. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's being around your family. Oh my gosh, no se compara.
It was a nice break. It was a nice break. I also got a haircut. I've been
Ah,
joking that I look more like my mom with layers,
oh,
but I should post a picture. But
no, dude, yo también aproveché to get a haircut when I was in Chihuahua. I'm like, oh
yeah.
my God, like now is the time. And I went
Hmm.
shopping and everything. Dude, Uber, I don't know if you took Uber, but it was like $3 to ride.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I can do this.
Hmm. Well, let's start for our audience. I know we go back, way back us, but our
Yeah.
audience, they need to get to know you also. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are, professionally, personally, whatever you want to share.
Yes, no, pues primero que nada, so again, I'm Melanie Arroyo, and I am a native from Chihuahua, Mexico. I was born there and grew up there till like the age of 10, 11-ish, moved to the United States directly to Kansas City. No hablaba nada de inglés. I just kind of had to figure it out as I went through. So while this experience was difficult, it's been a very helpful uh, background to have so that I can connect with some of my clients who have similar experiences.
Hmm.
Um, like the cultural identity development and the assimilation process and whatnot. But anyway, so with that, I moved directly to Kansas City. I attended the schools from KCMO to KCK in Johnson County. Went to college at the University of St. Mary and Emporia State, where I got my master's degree in clinical counseling, and then another master's degree in art therapy. So now professionally, I am an art therapist, and we're actually in my private practice right now.
Okay.
And yes,
Hmm.
and I'm also in City Council in Lenexa, representando la comunidad y a la orden también.
Hmm.
So I do a little bit of everything. I'm very politically involved in the community, but I'm also very much involved when it comes to like mental health conversations, especially with the Hispanic community.
Yeah. No, I have always admired because you're the example of why representation matters. We work together at UMKC, and the
Yes.
students always look for you because they could relate. Your stories were similar. The language, having somebody that speaks Spanish as a therapist was impactful for them because they could express what they were feeling in their own language. So yeah, you're the example of why representation matters not only in education but in every sector of life, in professionally. Um, so, going with that, what do you think? Because you've talked to many people in the community. What are some of the issues that we still need to work on as a community, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think from a mental health perspective, some of the issues that we need to work on is the first of all addressing intergenerational trauma. Um, I absolutely love that Gen Z and like the younger populations are getting acquainted with what intergenerational trauma is, and they're coming into therapy, they're embracing it, and they're willing to address this issue. Um, so understanding that, like the mistakes of our parents or for our grandparents, our family members, these are the result of colonization and trauma that extends way back in history. So I think uh, gathering that awareness has been so healing and supportive for my clients because they don't want to blame their family members for some of the traumatic experiences that they've been through, but they want to find an explanation for it. So I think talking about intergenerational trauma is very important. And also, of course, primero que nada, perderle el miedo a la terapia y a las conversaciones de la salud mental. I think that, we often talk about a stigma that exists in the Hispanic community when it comes to mental health. And but what we fail to address is why is there a stigma? The reason there is a stigma is because let's acknowledge that the mental health professions, the field of psychology, started as a field that oppressed minorities, oppressed women, the LGBT community, Latinos, people of color, lo que sea. And it was very quick to pathologize our experiences if they didn't fit within the Eurocentric lifestyle, right? So I think that stigma comes from the fact that therapy was once used against us, and then we internalize that as a way to protect ourselves. So I think we need to have a conversation about how therapy is a whole different experience than what it used to be in the world, um, even as far back as 10 years ago. So let's have these conversations about intergenerational trauma, welcoming therapy into our lives. And then also, I think we need to work on parenting, which is something that I'm going to talk about tomorrow during our event.
Yeah,
And we'll
yeah, yeah.
talk about that later. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think rethinking our parenting skills is something that it needs to change in the community.
Yeah. No, that's important. I think we do. Again, being back home, I saw things that why my parents were the way they are, and then it's up to me probably to end those. Uh, I don't know, to end the cycle that has been going on for so long. And yes, you're right. Sometimes being in therapy is a taboo. Uh, my parents still like, hey, why are you going to therapy? O a veces nos dicen, eso es de locos. Pero
Yeah.
sabemos que no es así. Es porque queremos ayuda y sabemos que hay algo que nos puede mejorar en nuestras vidas si conseguimos terapia. Do you have anything to say about people that are having a hard time finding a therapist or their parents don't want them to get therapy? Are there any resources that they can check on their phone or any books that they could be reading? What do you say to those that are having a hard time?
Yes, dude. Absolutely. I feel nothing but compassion for people in the community who are not in a position where they can look for therapy services. And I totally get it. I mean, as an immigrant myself and,
Mhm.
growing up, um, therapy is something that wasn't afforded to me because I didn't have insurance or because where do you find a Spanish speaking therapist or someone who understood my needs? There are a lot of challenges to finding the right therapist. And it's easy to get discouraged in the process. So I don't blame anyone who is in that position where they're like, fuck therapy, it's not for me, excuse the word.
It's
Pero
fine.
But that's kind of how people feel, right? Like they reach that point where they're just like exhausted. Um, and I guess mi consejo para ellos is just to let them know, um, don't give up. It's okay to maybe put a pause on your process of finding a therapist and maybe leaning into like some self-help books or like podcasts or like resources that are available to you, applications like you mentioned. Those are always great. Um, and then resume that search for a new therapist in the future. And I want people to know too that they're always more than welcome to contact me. I don't have to be your therapist, but if there's anything I can do to make the process easier for you all to connect with a therapist, I would love to do that. I like to think of myself as a resource for la comunidad. But yeah, but in terms of going back to self-help options, there are wonderful books out there. Oh my gosh, my clients will tell you I'm always like throwing a book at them, going like, "Have you read this book or this book?"
Yeah.
If you're like, "No, I'm not really into reading," totally fine. There are also wonderful podcasts out there like Latinx Therapy that talks a little bit about the issues that are important to the community. Um, there's also apps that are super helpful. Some of the I think, if anything, for people who are preparing to get into therapy, working on mindfulness and meditation is going to be essential before you
Yeah.
start therapy, because like the most critical ingredient to successful therapy is, well, first of all, having good rapport with your therapist, but then also being self-aware, being willing to be honest with yourself. And I feel like mindfulness and meditation, that's a great way of facilitating that process. So there are some apps. There's one called Liberate, which is specifically made for people of color. I also love Simple Habit, and the Sanvelo app is one that we used a lot at UMKC, and
Yeah.
that one is really cool because like you can track your mood, you can do meditations, it has coping skills integrated with it, and then last but not least, for those who are looking for um, an app to help them with creating distractions to stay away from like maybe like skin picking issues or like addictions or eating disorders, cositas así, or maybe even self harm. There's an app called Calm Harm that has
Mm.
these little coping skills that you can turn to in those moments when you have like urges to give it to whatever bad habit you're trying to beat.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna change gears a little because we'll continue with this conversation when we start talking about this weekend for our conference. But you have advocated for a lot of powerful things, and you do a lot of powerful things in the community. What are some ways that you are creating change and impacting the community, and how you're bringing change to Kansas City?
Yes, more than anything, I see myself as a work in progress. But I think for me, um, I think being a therapist was an important way for me to bring change to the community. Right, like we wanted representation when it comes to mental health. I personally struggle with anxiety and depression, and I'm very open about this. When I was younger, after going through that immigration process y todo eso, the only thing that was available to me to take care of myself was art. And
Hmm.
so once I learned that art therapy is a profession, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I want to do. Um, so far that I'm aware of, I'm the only like credentialed art therapist in Latina, bilingual here in Kansas City. If there are others out there, please contact me. I would love to network. Pero que yo sepa, like this is a service that I am uniquely bringing into the community. The other thing, making myself accessible to the community, making therapy again accessible, because there are so many barriers that keep Latinos from coming into therapy. So that's one of the ways that I'm making changes. And I don't just keep myself confined to my walls, right? To me, it's important to do events like these, where I can
Hmm.
spread awareness and have conversations con la comunidad acerca de la salud mental, para perderle el miedo.
Sí.
I studied conversaciones. And then, of course, my background as a mental health professional is what propelled me to run for office. It just became evident to me that the work that I was trying to do here needed to go beyond the walls of my office. You know, like there is so much of our mental health and our mental wellness that is placed in the community that we live in. So it just made sense that running for city council was important and instrumental to my work, right? Because if I can go out there and build safer and healthier communities, then that is supporting the work that I'm doing here in my office as a
Mm-hmm.
therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about representation more than anything as a young Latina is what I would say I'm bringing to the community.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me take you back because we skipped your whole educational experience. We do, as an educational organization, we care about your educational journey and all the stops and all the what happened that brought you to where you are now. Because I think it's also inspirational. If there's anybody out there or a college student that is thinking maybe getting into therapy or psychology or art therapy, I think your story will be really inspirational to them. But yeah, tell us from getting here, how was your educational experience as an immigrant, learning English, college? Yeah, share with us.
Sí, no, claro que sí. You know, when I first moved to Kansas City, I actually started going to the um, public KCMO school district. I think they were unaccredited at the time, or they were in the process of losing their accreditation. So I started in a school called, I think it was called JC Bryant. They already shut down. It was one of those schools that shut down back in like 2010. Um, but I didn't speak any English. Um, I had like ESL classes, and I had my twin sister to help me in that process to like learn English and have someone to practice with. Um, and then from there, I went to like Northeast Middle School, Northeast High School a little bit. I kind of dabbled between the two. But then I ended up going to Rosedale Middle School. We moved around a lot. And then after Rosedale, my sister and I went to Shawnee Mission North High School. And then from there, that's when we really started honing in our interest in like making art, and our English was improving a lot. Y ya después de ahí como que le agarré un interés a ir a la
Yeah.
universidad. Of course, there was a part of me that was like, oh, I don't know if college is for me, like I don't have money. I'm a woman of color. At the time, I was undocumented. I didn't really have hope for the future. Um, but I was like, you know what? Let me just work as if. Let me just work towards getting good grades, getting a good GPA, taking my ACT and everything, and let's hope that the rest works itself out. And it did. It worked perfectly. So that's when I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gaining momentum. I'm really confident in my ability to achieve my goals. So that's when I applied to the University of St. Mary, and I went out to Leavenworth to study studio art and psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
after that, I was like, okay, like I'm feeling really good about this. Ever since I was 16, I knew I wanted to be an art therapist. So by the time I was like 20, 22, the fact that I still wanted to be an art therapist, that meant a lot, because you know how it goes. A lot of kids or students change their mind about their major, which is totally fine, by the way. People
Mm-hmm.
are allowed to
Mm-hmm.
do that. But for me, it was still a passion. So then I went ahead and did my master's in art therapy at Emporia State University.
Mm-hmm. I like this RevDub series because working in the university, the students came with only a few options that they knew about or they were told that they could do: teacher, lawyer, doctor,
Mm-hmm.
engineer maybe. But there's other areas that we can use our skills or what we love or our talents, like art therapy, like environmental or public health. So yeah, I like how highlighting you all in your journey. So yeah, if there's any college student out there, you just know that you can also make it. If you're learning English in school, then you can also be a therapist. You can be a teacher. If you're having a hard time or you don't want to go back to school in August, you need to go back to school so you can also be impacting people later on in life when you become a professional. Um, let's talk about your political side of your life and the challenges that you see there and how you have overcome those challenges. What do we need to do as a community to see more Latino people in politics? Uh,
Yes. So of course, like I think representation is like you could say that this is the gateway to get people to run for office, right? Because once they see themselves in their elected officials, they feel more inspired to run. So the one thing is, I started running for office. Excuse me, I started getting involved politically back in 2018 when my friend Susan Reese, who is a Kansas legislator, um, when she started running, I was like just inspired. I knew it was in the cards for me one day. I just didn't know how or when, but it was very important to me. And the fact that she got elected and that there
yeah.
was this desire in the community to see more people like her, more women like her in office, it was just great. Um, so then with time I was like thinking, okay, like, do I want to do this? Am I good enough? And so that's when the imposter syndrome starts to kick in, right? Because I'm like, oh, I don't have that background in like city development or legal issues, or I'm not an engineer. But you know what? It makes sense that a mental health background and then an immigrant and a Latina background was very much necessary. We needed representation in Lenexa. About 20% of the population identifies as non-white. And at the time when I was thinking about running, the whole city council, they were all white, which nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't representative of the population of Lenexa. Um, So lo primero que tuve que hacer es perderle el miedo, ¿no? O sea, simply to believe in myself. I told myself that no matter what the outcome was in the end, the fact that I even put my name down to run and I was going to knock on doors and talk to people, that alone was already an achievement for la comunidad, for la raza, because I knew that I was going to start a trend with that. And sure enough, other people started signing up, like Amanda Vega Mabec, Jocelyn Todd Garcia, and and a bunch of other Latinas across the state started to run too. Shout out to Melissa, who won her primary in Wyandotte. But anyways, the other thing that I want people to know is that you just have to have your heart in the right place. You may not, because I think for me a challenge has been, again, I don't have that background in city development or city code or legal issues, but those things I can learn. The
Mhm.
things that some people struggle to learn are things like empathy, listening skills, um, cultural awareness, my favorite, intellectual um, humility. Like, so the
Mhm.
willingness to say, oh yeah, that was wrong of me, let me change that. Or like, oh, I had that fact wrong, let me correct it. These are very essential life skills that many people um, uh, take years or decades to learn. No fault to them, right? But I knew that I was bringing in something unique to city council with that. When my opponent called me out for being like half his age, I mean, I was like, well, first of all, that's ageism. That's
Mhm.
problematic. But I'm like, you know what? I may not have the life experiences that you may have, and I totally respect that. But nonetheless, these are the skills that I'm bringing into it, and my heart is in the right place. So if you can just go ahead and be confident with that, the other learning that comes later.
Mhm. Over the last couple of years, we've lived on how we are pulling apart from each other. And we don't want to listen to each other. We don't want to talk to each other. When you were campaigning, is there any memories, happy memories, or anything that surprised you when you were knocking on doors or meeting people?
Yeah, there were a couple of scenarios where I ran into people who it's almost like they lived in a whole different realm of reality. where conversations about like CRT came up, and they're like, what's your position on CRT, or defunding the police, or the integrity of our elections. And I would just let them know, like, oh yeah, like, there's no reason to suspect that our elections in Kansas are being meddled with in any way or rigged. I would offer this information, and CRT is not an issue in Kansas. That is a legal, like, or a PhD level class, and I would try like answering these questions, like, no need to defund the police in Lenexa, like the budget in Lenexa is consistent with the growth of the population. I will go into all these details, but they weren't having it. Like, seeing my name and my face, my color and everything, my accent, it was just immediately threatening, and they would already put in a box. So that was a little bit discouraging, because I wanted to have, these conversations and like meet in the middle. But I think for me, it was important to just acknowledge, like, these people are not dumb. They're just like, they've just been sold an idea that I guess fit with their sense of reality. And I hope that eventually they can see otherwise. But I always let them know that if we're gonna disagree, that's fine. But I'm gonna treat you with empathy, with dignity and respect. And when I represent you in city council, please don't hesitate to call me, so that we can work together. Because at the end of the day, city council is nonpartisan, right? It's neither Democrat nor Republican. Potholes, pools, parks, again, those
That's
are not
everybody.
Democrat or Republican. That's everybody. So this is something that where we can meet in the middle and work on these things.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into the conversation about this weekend, do you have any words for anybody that wants to engage and become a strong voice in our community, or maybe even run for office? Any encouraging words to them?
Yes. Pues primero que nada, no one ever regrets courage. No one ever regrets being courageous, right? So if you feel like you're at a point where you have to step out of your comfort zone and go, like, network, meet with people, join a new group or organization. I remember when I first stepped foot in like the office of the Johnson County Democrats. Oh my gosh, like, it was a whole physical experience for me. It was difficult, but I knew that it was only going to be momentary. Um, in the end, I never regretted asking the questions, getting the information, putting myself out there, making mistakes. Eso es lo otro también, ¿no? Hay que perderle el miedo a cometer errores, because that is a part of your learning process. Also, perderle el miedo to the possibility of failure. It's never failure because it is a part of your process. Again, if you already like put yourself out there, you're already winning. So we need to be flexible with our expectations of ourselves.
Thank you. So this weekend we are hosting our primer encuentro de Padres Empoderados, which is going to be an all in Spanish summit for papás, madres o cuidadores de niños, estudiantes. And I like how you said perder el miedo. We have to perder el miedo de hablar de mental health, de wellness. So we're going to start doing that this weekend, hablando con nuestros papás. But what can we expect? What are we going to talk about on your session?
Yes. So on my session, we're going to talk about the mental health of our children. Many times, and I'll talk more about this tomorrow, of course, but many times when I have parents calling me on the phone and being like, hey, like, I need to set up an appointment for my child, necesito que me lo arregles, porque está bien rebelde.
Yeah.
Like, not judging these parents at all, but I'm like, oh boy, you have no idea what you're signing yourself up for. Because here in therapy, there is no fixing. I'm not going to fix your child because your child is not the problem. And you as a parent, you're not the problem. But there is a problem in the lines of communication between you and your child. And those lines of communication are going to look differently when you are, dealing with a child who is a toddler, maybe someone who is like 8 years old, or like a preteen or a teenager. Creo que el mensaje más importante de mañana es que tenemos que ser we need to be willing to be adaptable when it comes to being parents. Because the way you parented your children when they were babies is not going to be the same when they're 13 or 15 or 18. So that's going to be our biggest takeaway tomorrow, that the mental health of our children begins in the home, and it begins with the parents. If the parents are doing well, then the children are doing well.
And then therapy, yeah, something that I learned with therapy, it's not a one-time thing. It follows you. You need to be nurturing and you need to keep with it. So, yes, our last question, if you don't have anything else to share about tomorrow, que ya nos dejaste picados cuando te vamos a hablar mañana. But what does it mean to be an Impacto Changemaker? And why is it important to recognize those in the community and the power and the contributions of our leaders in the community?
You know what? It meant a lot to me. When it was actually earlier in the year when I was in Chihuahua attending to a family emergency that I got the news. And it meant a lot because I was like, I have a lot of days when I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible therapist, or like, I'm not doing this right. Does anybody even care? Or like, is anyone looking at this? Which, don't get me wrong, ultimately my work is for me, but it's nice to get that recognition from the community because it keeps me going. It motivates me. It makes me feel like, okay, my work is being seen and is being valued. And it just inspires me to keep going and to do more. And I can only see how this will also support the work of other activists who are in the community, who often feel overlooked or maybe dismissed.
Did I ever read what your nominee said about you? I don't think, do you know?
Oh, no,
okay.
I have no
Okay.
idea.
Well, here we go. Melanie is an active member of the Latino community as a mental health professional, helping Latinx families and individuals end the stigma around mental health and generational trauma. This work led her to discover that in order to improve the mental health of Latinos, she had to run for office and represent them so that they will have a voice at the table. She became the first Latina elected in the Lenexa City Council and is proud of the work that she is doing to represent other underrepresented families. You also did an internship in Puerto Rico.
I did, yes.
To help boost the mental health of kids with severe brain injuries. I didn't know that. I didn't know you. Okay.
I did. Oh my gosh, yes. Saludos a mi gente puertorriqueña. Tu tierra es hermosísima. Great food too. Oh my gosh, I loved it though. I stayed in Guaynabo in Puerto Rico for a while, doing an art therapy internship with children with cognitive disabilities, children with traumatic burn injuries, and then also children who were considered at risk. Yeah. It was an amazing experience. I absolutely loved it.
Okay. Well, I think this is the end. It's a short conversation over lunch. Hopefully you got to enjoy. If you're watching us, you got to enjoy our conversation while you were eating your lunch. And if you haven't registered, we'll leave the link below so you can join us at the Encuentro de Padres mañana. Melanie, nos vemos pronto. Te tengo que entregar tu carne seca para que te hagas una machaca. Pero nos vemos mañana.
I see. I look forward to it. Muchas gracias a todos. And please don't hesitate to contact me if anyone here has any more questions about mental health.
True. We'll, after this, we'll create a profile for you. And in the profile, we can include your contact information for other therapists or other people that are willing to contact you. Pero bueno, nos vemos pronto. Adiós.
Nos vemos. Bye-bye.
Bye.